She grew up invisible, the cleaner's daughter, sleeping on the floor while the wealthy walked on the marble her mother polished. One day, the billionaire found a forgotten notebook, and what he saw inside changed everything. When he realized what that girl was capable of, he was speechless, because true wealth was where he had never dared to look. Before we start this story, tell me, where are you watching from? Leave it in the comments. And if you like stories that touch the heart and make us see the world differently, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. There's a new story here for you every day. It was early morning when Raul Montenegro drove through the electronic gates of the mansion. The chauffeur had dropped the businessman at the main entrance, and now the heavy silence of the house greeted him like a cold shadow. He strode confidently across the imported marble floor, pleased to be back in his private empire. Every detail of that residence had been designed to showcase control, refined taste, and above all, power. Raul was a man who believed the world was divided into two categories, those who command and those who obey, and he had always been on the right side of that line. But that night, as he entered the main living room, a spacious area lit by crystal chandeliers and decorated with contemporary art, something broke the perfect order. There, on the floor, next to the white velvet sofa, a little girl slept curled up on a thin, faded blanket. She clutched a crumpled notebook to her chest as if it were a treasure. Her bare feet were dirty with soil. Her kinky hair, somewhat disheveled, fell across her small, serene face. Raul stopped in the middle of the room. He felt a strange mix of anger, discomfort, and something he couldn't name. Who was this child? How had she gotten in? And why on earth was she sleeping on the floor of his living room? That's when Ruth appeared. The black cleaner in a wrinkled uniform and with frightened eyes emerged from the side door with a bucket in her hands. She saw her employer and turned pale. She started apologizing before he even said a word. "Mr. Montenegro, I didn't expect you back so early. I was just about to wake her, I swear." Raul crossed his arms, tense. "What is she doing here, Ruth?" "She was waiting for me in the garden, sir. I had to stay late today, polishing the library floor. By the time I finished, it was too late. The last bus had already gone. We were going to leave first thing in the morning, I promise." Ruth spoke quickly, nervously, like someone trying to put out a fire with words. Raul looked at the sleeping girl. There was something disturbing about the scene. It wasn't pity, it was something else. Perhaps the strangeness of seeing someone so small sleeping on the floor of such a large house. Perhaps the silent shame of being confronted with an image he preferred not to see. "In the morning you both leave. No delays, understood?" "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir." Raul went upstairs without looking back. But as he entered his bedroom, before closing the door, he paused once more. Something bothered him. It wasn't the girl's presence itself, it was the serenity with which she slept, as if that cold floor was safer, more welcoming than the world outside. He tried to sleep, but couldn't. The images of that child curled up on the living room floor kept coming back. After almost 2 hours of tossing and turning in his king-size bed, Raul gave up. He went downstairs again, this time in silence. The house was plunged in semi-darkness. He walked to the living room. The girl was still asleep. Ruth, lying on the sofa nearby, dozed with her head in her hand. That's when Raul saw the notebook. It was open on the floor, next to the girl. He crouched down and picked it up carefully, as if handling something fragile. The pages were filled with drawings, floor plans of the mansion, sketches of every room, doors, hallways, windows, everything mapped with impressive precision. There were notes alongside. Library door squeaks. Hallway window doesn't close properly. Kitchen light bulb has been out for 3 days. And then, in the corner of one of the pages, he read a sentence written in a firm, almost adult hand. "A house is just a house when someone is dreaming inside." Raul froze. He turned the following pages. There were sketches of small machines, childish drawings, true, but full of logic and creativity. A vacuum cleaner made from a plastic bottle and a fan motor, a pulley system for lifting heavy buckets, a makeshift water filter, and next to each drawing, a short explanation. To help Mom clean faster, so she doesn't have to climb stairs with weight, so we can save water. Raoul sat down on the floor. For the first time in many years, he felt something akin to shame. That girl, invisible, silent, ignored, saw the house in a way he never had. She didn't see expensive marble, crystal chandeliers, or works of art. She saw small flaws, hidden needs, opportunities to solve problems, and more than that, she dreamed. She dreamed of easing her mother's burden. She dreamed of building something useful, something real. He closed the notebook slowly and placed it back on the floor. He went back to his room, but this time he carried a new weight in his chest. Something had changed that night. He just didn't know how much yet. As the sun began to lighten the garden, Ruth woke up with a start. Clara was still asleep beside her. The cleaner glanced at the clock on the wall and quickly got up, trying not to make a sound. She needed to wake her daughter and leave before her employer came down. But as she turned, she found Raúl Montenegro standing in the doorway, already dressed in a suit, holding a coffee cup. "Good morning, Ruth." "Good morning, sir." "We'll be leaving now, just let me wake her." "Wait a moment." Ruth froze. Raúl walked to the coffee table and placed the cup on the glass. He looked at Clara, who was now beginning to stir, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. "What's her name?" "Clara, sir." "Clara." He repeated the name slowly, as if tasting its weight. "How old is she?" 10, sir." Raúl nodded. He was silent for a few seconds, as if making a difficult decision. Then he looked directly at Ruth. "Does she go to school?" "Yes, sir, at a public school near our home. She's a good student, gets good grades. I saw her notebook." Ruth swallowed hard. She didn't know if that was good or bad. "I'm sorry, sir, if she touched anything." "She didn't touch anything. She drew." Raúl crossed his arms. "She drew the whole house, with details even I don't know. And more than that, she invented things, machines, ideas." Ruth didn't know what to say. Clara, now fully awake, looked at the floor, embarrassed. "Who taught her to draw like that?" "Nobody, sir. She's always liked observing things. Since she was little. She spends time drawing while she waits for me. She says one day she'll build machines to help me clean faster." Raúl took a deep breath. He looked at the girl and for the first time spoke directly to her. "Clara, do you like inventing things?" The girl looked up shyly and nodded. "Yes, I do, sir." "And what if I gave you the chance to really learn, to study robotics, engineering, that sort of thing?" Clara's eyes widened. Ruth's did too. "Sir, there's a private school here in the development. My nephew goes there. They have classes in robotics, programming, science. I'll pay for her to go there, if she wants to." Ruth started to cry. It wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of relief, of gratitude, of disbelief. Clara, for her part, couldn't speak. She just looked at her mother and then at Raúl, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Do you agree, Ruth?" I don't know how to thank you, sir." "You don't need to thank me. You just need to let her study." And so, that morning, Clara's life began to change. But neither she, nor Ruth, nor even Raúl could imagine how much that decision would transform not just the girl, but the mansion itself, and everyone who lived within it. In the following months, Clara started attending the private school within the development. At first, it was difficult. The other students came from wealthy families, wore designer clothes and talked about international travel as if they were discussing the weather. Clara wore the uniform Raúl had bought for her, but she carried the weight of being different on her shoulders. She was the cleaner's daughter, and everyone knew it. Some classmates treated her with indifference, others with curiosity. But there was a small group that looked at her with contempt. Led by Bernardo, the son of a rival businessman of Raúl's, These boys made sure to remind Clara of her place. "Hey, Clara, did your mum clean the bathroom today?" Bernardo would laugh loudly in the hallway. "Leave her alone, Bernardo. She's here because Mr. Montenegro took pity on her." Clara pretended not to hear, but inside, every word cut like a wound. She knew she had something to prove. Not to them, but to herself. The robotics classes were taught by Professor Marcello, a retired engineer who had returned to teaching out of love for education. He noticed Clara from the first day. While the other students played with the assembly kits, she studied the manuals with absolute attention. She asked intelligent questions, connected ideas in unexpected ways. One day, during a practical exercise, the challenge was to build a robot capable of following a black line drawn on the floor. Most of the students gave up after several attempts, but Clara stayed until the end of class, disassembling and reassembling the components. When she finally succeeded, the robot not only followed the line, it dodged obstacles that she herself had placed in its path. "How did you do that?" asked Professor Marcello, impressed. "I added an extra sensor, Professor. I thought it would be more useful if it could see what's in front of it." Marcello smiled. This girl wasn't just learning. She was innovating. At the end of the semester, the school announced a science fair. Each student had to present their own project. Clara decided to create something that truly mattered to her, an automated cleaning machine made with inexpensive and recyclable materials. She used motors from broken toys, plastic bottles, wheels from shopping carts, and electrical wires that her professor helped her obtain. The project was simple but functional, and it had a clear purpose: to help people like her mother work with less physical effort. On the night of the fair, the room was packed. Parents, teachers, administrators, and there, in the back, were Ruth and Raul Montenegro. The cleaner was nervous, wearing a simple but clean outfit. Raul, beside her, observed everything with attention. When it was Clara's turn to present, she walked onto the stage with trembling legs. But as she began to speak, her voice became firm. She explained each step of the project. She showed how the machine worked. She talked about efficiency, sustainability, and dignity in work. And she ended with a sentence that silenced the entire room. "This project is for my mother, and for all the mothers who work invisibly, making the world go round." The audience gave a standing ovation. Ruth was crying. Raoul, for the first time in a long time, felt his eyes welling up. Clara won the science fair, and more than that, she conquered her own fear of being seen. Clara's victory at the science fair did not go unnoticed. The story of the cleaner's daughter who became a robotics prodigy began to circulate on social media, local news websites, and even TV shows. Raul Montenegro, seeing the buzz, decided to take a step further. He invited Clara to present her project at his company's headquarters during a meeting with investors and executives. The idea was to show that innovation could come from anywhere, and that social responsibility wasn't just rhetoric. On the day of the presentation, Clara entered the corporate auditorium wearing a blazer that Raoul had had custom made for her. It was the first time she had ever set foot in such an environment. Glass walls, giant screens, men and women in expensive suits sitting in leather armchairs. Ruth was in the audience, next to Raoul, her hands clasped in her lap, praying softly. Clara walked onto the stage. She plugged in the USB drive. Images of her project began to appear on the screen. She took a deep breath and started to speak. She explained the concept, the materials, the construction process. She talked about the social impact, about how it could be replicated in low-income communities. Her voice, despite the initial nervousness, gained confidence. She was no longer speaking like a child. She was speaking like someone who had something important to say. But then, right in the middle of the presentation, a man stood up. It was Claudio Braga, one of the company's biggest investors and known for his sharp temper. He crossed his arms and interrupted Clara with a loud, sarcastic voice. "With all due respect, Raoul, but is this a joke? You brought a child, your cleaner's daughter, isn't she, to present a project made with plastic bottles and a shopping cart, and you expect us to take this seriously?" The auditorium fell silent. Some executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ruth lowered her head, embarrassed. Raoul clenched his fists, but before he could react, Clara stepped forward. "You're right," she said, looking directly at Claudio. "I am the cleaner's daughter, and I made this project with cheap materials. But do you know why?" Claudio raised an eyebrow, surprised by the response. "Because I don't have money to buy imported parts. Because I see my mom coming home every day with her back aching, and because I believe that true innovation isn't just for the wealthy, it's for solving the problems of those who need it most." The room grew even quieter. Clara continued, "You might find it amusing, you might think it has no value, but I've learned something. If you've never had to make do with little, you'll never understand the value of turning that little into a lot. And if you can't see that, maybe the problem isn't my project, maybe it's how you see the world." The auditorium erupted in applause. Claudio, speechless, sat back down. Raoul stood up, clapping too, a proud smile on his face. Ruth was crying, this time not from shame but from pride. Clara finished her presentation, and as she stepped off the stage, she knew she had changed something in that room, not just the perception of her project, but the perception of who she was and who she could become. In the days following the presentation, something extraordinary happened. Clara's speech went viral. Someone had recorded the video and posted it on social media. Within hours, millions of people had watched this 10-year-old girl facing an arrogant investor with courage, intelligence, and dignity. Messages of support poured in from everywhere. Teachers, engineers, scientists, mothers, workers, everyone identified with her story. Raoul Montenegro was approached by several tech companies interested in funding the development of Clara's project. A university offered her a full scholarship for future engineering studies. Education NGOs invited her to speak at public schools. And most importantly, Ruth got a promotion. She went from being a cleaner to coordinating the maintenance department at Raoul's company, with a fair salary, a contract, and full employee benefits. But not everything was easy. Claudio Braga, publicly humiliated, tried to retaliate. He pressured other investors to withdraw their support from Raoul's company. He spread rumors that it was all just cheap marketing. He even tried to sue Raoul for misuse of a minor's image. But public opinion was on Clara's side, and the more Claudio tried to attack her, the deeper he sank. One afternoon, Raoul received a phone call. It was Claudio. He requested a private meeting. Raoul agreed, curious to know what the man wanted. They met at a discreet coffee shop, far from the spotlight. Claudio looked tired. He ordered a black coffee and sat in silence for a few seconds before speaking. "I was wrong, Raoul." Raoul said nothing. He just waited. "I spent my whole life believing success was about having more than others, more money, more power, more control. And when I saw that girl on stage, I felt anger, because she reminded me of something I had forgotten, that true success is about transforming lives, about leaving things better than you found them." Raoul sighed. "Claudio, you don't need to apologize to me. You need to apologize to Clara." "I know. And that's what I did." Days later, Claudio Braga showed up at Clara's school. He asked to speak with her in the presence of Ruth and her teacher, Marcelo. He apologized publicly, acknowledged his mistake, and made a significant donation so Clara's project could be replicated in underserved communities across the country. Clara, with the wisdom of someone who learned about forgiveness early, accepted his apology. And she said something that marked Claudio forever. "You didn't make a mistake by underestimating me. You made a mistake by believing value is measured by money, but it's okay. We learn when we want to." At that moment, Something changed in Claudio too. He left feeling ashamed, but also touched, and he began little by little to rethink his own choices. 5 years passed. Clara was now 15 and studying at one of the country's top technical schools on a full scholarship. Her cleaning machine project had been perfected and transformed into a social startup, employing dozens of people and distributing equipment to domestic worker cooperatives in various cities. Ruth, her mother, was now operations manager at Raoul's company and a speaker at events on social inclusion and valuing work. The mansion where it all began had also changed. Raoul had transformed it into a social innovation center, where young people from low-income communities could access classes in robotics, programming, and entrepreneurship. And in the room where Clara had once slept on the floor, there was now a small, permanent exhibit, the thin blanket she used that night, the crumpled blue notebook, and beside them, a metal plaque with the quote, "Raoul would never forget. True wealth begins when someone sees who the world tries to hide." Clara visited the mansion from time to time, and whenever she passed through that room, she felt a pang in her chest, not of sadness, but of gratitude. Because she knew that night on the cold floor hadn't been the end, it had been the beginning. Raoul, now older and wiser, used to say that Clara hadn't just changed his life, she had changed the way he saw the world, and that, for him, was worth more than any fortune. One afternoon during an interview for a business magazine, Raoul was asked what his best investment in life had been. He smiled and answered without hesitation, "It was believing in a girl who slept on the floor, because she taught me that genius doesn't live in mansions. It lives in those who dream, even without a place to lay their head." And Clara, she kept dreaming, she kept inventing, she kept transforming invisibility into visibility, silence into voice, and smallness into greatness. Because she learned from an early age that a person's size isn't measured by the heights they reach, but by the depth of the impact they leave. And that was Clara's story. The invisible girl who became unforgettable. And you, what did you think? Did this story make you reflect on anything? Did it touch you in some way? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading every message. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now and hit the notification bell. There's a new story here every day. Stories that move, that inspire, that transform. See you next time. Until then, remember, true wealth lies in seeing who the world tries to hide.